Now, we've gotten a list of your assets and your debts. You've got a list of, you should have a budget or an outline of a budget. The next thing that you need to think about, of course, is your kids. And the number one question is, how do I tell my kids that we're going to file for divorce? And there are a million really good books out there that we have on our website. How do you tell your kids about a divorce? And what's best for kids from the period of when you start filing for divorce, going through this temporary period, and then what's best for kids after the divorce has been entered. If you're in the planning stage, what you want to start thinking about is, how are you going to approach this? Are you going to be in one of those kind of divorces where you guys can work together for the best interest of your kid and put your kids first? Or are you going to be in one of those situations where you think your husband might try to say, I want primary custody or full custody, or, you know, I want to be the whatever it is in your state. Some states sort of come from the perspective of it's going to be 50-50 joint custody, and other states come from the perspective of there's one primary parent or custodial parent. There's all kinds of names for this, and so now we're issue spotting again, because I can't tell you what's in your state. But you need to find out how your state approaches parenting, and it's going to probably be in your statutes of your state, where there'll be some factors about, and most states operate on something called the best interest of the children. So, and they look to try to figure out that basically most states come from the perspective of they don't want the kids' world to be completely rocked, which of course it is because you're getting a divorce. But they want things to sort of stay what they call the status quo. So whoever the kids are accustomed to being around the most, and, you know, who gets them up and brushes their teeth and takes them to school, and various things like that, that's where the state is going to usually focus the parenting plan. But like I said, some states are very different, and some just say you're going to do 50-50, and some states just say you're going to do 50-50 and you're just going to, you know, share the kids in an equitable manner. And other states require you to have a really specific parenting plan or child custody arrangement that says where they're going to be on Christmas and what time they're going to be picked up for their visitation or their residential schedule. So I can't tell you how your state is, but I can tell you need to find out exactly how it operates in your state, because you've got to start planning for what's going to be required of you. So on the very extreme, there are these highly specific plans, and on the other extreme, there are these sort of loosey-goosey, just write something down and so that the court can, you know, sort of say this is the way your parenting is going to be. But what you want to start thinking about in your planning phase is how you think you're going to be able to work through the parenting. And you know, kind of the very best way is if you can be one of the people who says, I'm going to put my children's needs before my own, and that is really, really hard. But I've had some amazing clients who have, you know, one comes to mind, they had a son, and as much as she wanted to have the son, you know, more than the husband or the father, she realized that it was really important to the kid to have two parents, and she put all of her own needs aside so that the child could have a shared custody plan. And I watched, you know, their parenting plan over the years, and it's been hard for her, but it's been really good for the kid. So if they have a father who's basically a decent father, a lot of parenting experts will say that the children really need time with both parents. I'm going to put on our website some really interesting studies done by some big parenting scholars and talk about the importance of mothers in a child's life and the importance of fathers in a child's life. And I would really recommend that you read those studies and try as hard as you can to do it from a sort of academic, or like it's not you, it's not your family, to try to really hard see if you can see these things from the perspective of your child. That's where the rubber meets the road, because we've all seen families where they put the kids in the middle and they use children as the pawn in the divorce, sort of, well, he's not coming over to your house and he doesn't want to go to your house. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying the most important thing for you to do now is start doing some research, because you've got some time right now to think about this and to think about how you want it to be for your kids. That said, if you think that you're going to get into some sort of a legal battle over a child custody plan, then you want to start thinking about positioning yourself for that battle. And in some states, like I said, they look for the status quo. So a lot of women come to me and are really surprised to find out, let's say you work full-time and so does your husband, but let's say you drop the kids off at daycare, but he picks them up every day because he gets off earlier than you. And then he takes the kids home and does homework and starts dinner, and then you come home at 5 or 6 o'clock. In some states, that's going to put him in a leg up position so that he's might get a better might get more time with the children than you do, because the courts in some states say, well, he's really the after-school person and he's going to have more residential time or more visitation or custody time with the kids. So if you're in that situation, you know, this is sort of legal strategy talking now, you might want to go talk to a lawyer now and say, I'm thinking of filing for divorce, but I've got a problem. It looks like my husband has more custodial time with the kids just because of my work schedule. What should I do? And I would go have a 1-hour consult with a lawyer, and we talked about how to choose a lawyer in a different session, but find a lawyer, go and say, this is my situation, what do I need to do? Because if you're not like hot to get a divorce tomorrow and you've got a few months to plan this, you can change the way that you have your residential time and your children's schedule so that it will look, when you go into the divorce, like you're a little bit more equal, or maybe you even have more time with the kids than their father does. So those are issues that we're talking about. I'm not trying to say you're going to lose your kids, or he's going to get the kids, or you're going to get the kids, or even if you're in a state where anybody gets the kids. Those are just the types of things you have to think about. If you think that you might be heading into a contested divorce and you can see that there's going to be a fight ahead, here's some crazy things you have to start thinking about. Because in some cases, if you can't agree on where the kids are going to live and how you're going to have a custody plan or a parenting plan or whatever it's called in your state, sometimes the court will appoint an evaluator. They call them sometimes a case manager or a parent evaluator or a guardian ad litem, which is a court word, but the abbreviation is GAL, which is a guardian who's appointed to the children for the purpose of a legal case. So if you're going to have one of these professionals appointed in your case, which is really, really common, and we'll talk in another session about how to approach a parenting evaluation or whatever that it is in your state. But if you can see that that might be coming down the pike, then you've got to stop and look and see how you look to an outside person. And here's where you got to think about. What's on your Facebook page? Do you have pictures of yourself on there, going to parties? Are there going to be allegations that you're you drink too much or you're not attentive to the children? I had this client, oh my goodness, she wrote this blog about the fact that her husband had a girlfriend and he had left her. And she wrote this blog about, I was lying on the floor, I took the Valium, I drank a bottle of wine, I was sobbing and crying. And in the middle of her divorce, this shows up in my office, and they're saying, what kind of a mother is she? So you want to start thinking about how you're going to look to a parenting evaluator and what is on your Facebook page. And you're saying, I can't possibly afford that, but then on your Facebook page it shows, I'm going to Las Vegas with my girlfriends for a spa weekend, and you just have to be very careful about what you have out in public, and you want to start watching your image. So this is not the time to start talking about your inner turmoil in some kind of a public forum when you're heading into a divorce. Really important to remember that. Or look at your credit card receipts, and you can do the same thing to father the kids too. It's like, well, I'm a great full-time dad and I'm there all the time, but then when we get the credit card receipts, we see that he's, travels all the time and is never home, and you can start to dispute the amount of time that the father spends with the children by looking and seeing, go to the ATM machines, and you can kind of see there's not much privacy anymore. But that's going to be true for you as well. And then you get in a parenting evaluation and somebody gets a hold of your credit card statements and it shows, well, look you were out every single Thursday and Friday evening, so how were you doing the homework with the kids? Another thing you want to think about is if you drink, I want to say too much, whatever that means, but if you drink a lot, or if you think your husband's going to make an allegation that you drink too much, or that you take drugs, or you smoke weed, or you're on tranquilizers, or you take SSRIs or some sort of medication, that stuff will all be looked at by a parenting evaluator in the court. And it's perfectly fine to be on medication when you're in a divorce, because 90% of all people in divorce are either depressed or anxious. And if you're taking medicine that's prescribed by your doctor and you're taking it in the appropriate amount, it shouldn't be a problem. I can't say it won't be a problem, but that's your best bet. And you should talk to your lawyer about that. But if you're smoking weed or you're doing cocaine or anything like that, you better get yourself really, really cleaned up before you head into a divorce. Because one thing you don't want, and it happens all the time, you go into a court hearing and let's say your husband says, well, she smokes weed all the time. It's not uncommon for a judge to say, go have a test right now today. And there's different kinds of drug testing. One has something called ETG, and that can tell if you'd have any alcohol for, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 days. And then there's drug tests, like marijuana stays in your system for some period of time, and you need to look it up because I can't give you advice, but I think it's longer than you think. And then there's something called a hair follicle test, and they can look in your hair back a certain number of months, and they can tell if you've done cocaine or what kind of drugs you've done. And I'm not saying you've done drugs, but you just need to be aware of that, because if that's the case in your situation, you might want to wait a certain amount of time until everything's out of your system before you file, because you certainly don't want to go into court and have them. And likewise, if your husband, drinks too much, or you know that he does drugs, then you might want to file sooner before he's allowed to get all the stuff out of his system. So if you're in the driver's seat and you know that he was out smoking weed with his friends last weekend, then find out how long those tests are good for. And if you want to make an allegation that he shouldn't be doing that around the children, then you don't want to wait 6 months and get a divorce when all that stuff's out of his system. So I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do. We're just issue spotting now. We're talking about the different things that sometimes come up in custody battles and how you want to be able to approach those things.